Well, I just want to welcome everyone to the Department of Art Studio VU lecture series. And this is the last lecture of this 2021 season, our 13th year of doing this program. And let me just introduce myself. I'm Mel Ziegler, professor, but also chair of the Visiting Artists Committee. I want to thank the Arts and Science Dean's Office for their support of this program for the last 13 years, and also thank the Margaret Stonewall Wooldridge Hamlet Endowment, which subsidizes this program as well. Would like to also thank our current acting chair, Vesna Pavlovich, and for her support, and our chair, Mark Hosford, who's currently on leave, but also has been very supportive of the program as well. Special thank you to Jerry Phillips for coordinating the media program, but also helping out with promotion and doing the poster, which is always very excellent. It's always great to see. And then also Emily Stewart for all her help in putting together the program as well. Finally, I'd like to just say thank you to my committee member, Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, and thank her for all her work in this program for the last year. And I'm just going to turn it over to her now to introduce our visiting artist, Cosmo Whyte. So Magda, why don't you take it away?
So thank you, Mel, for introducing our program, and thank you for acknowledge the work in our committee. And I want to first of all say how extraordinarily wonderful it is to have Cosmo with us. Cosmo Whyte, born in 1982 in Jamaica, he has exhibited widely in the United States, the Netherlands, Norway, England, France, South Africa. He studied at the Burlington College in Vermont for his BFA, at Maryland Institute College of Art for his postbaccalaureate certificate, and at the University of Michigan for his MFA. Whyte has been the recipient of the Harper Award 2021, the Art Matters Award 2019, the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award 2019, the Working Artist Award 2018, the Drawing Center Open Session Fellowship 2018, the Artadia Award 2016, the International Sculptural Center of Outstanding Achievement in Contemporary Sculpture Award 2015, and the Age Award 2010. This gentleman just bought in 1982 and has been grasping award almost like out of his crib. What is extraordinary for me and what I feel of great importance is the work that Cosmo Whyte has built in the last decade, and the elegant path and the easiness when he moved from drawing to photography to painting to sculpture, and the incredible journey that he has taken narrating and tracing the history of the Black diasporic body. There is this magnificent piece of him, A Well-Traveled Negro, who not only in the title compiled an incredible long and hard history, but in the beauty of juxtaposing a variety of soundscape, an integration of sonic experience and beauty of sites and territories unseen and unimagined that really not only invite us to travel with him, but that allowed us to trace the difficult and incredible, obscure, unknown now of the journey of the Black body from there to here in these constant swings of back and forth and trying to find a space into a struggle for freedom. I am honored not only to introduce Cosmo as a colleague for who I have great respect, but as a dear friend. In saying so, I want to welcome him to our campus, to our school, even what it is online and in the cloud, but to acknowledge in doing that, that Vanderbilt sits in sacred indigenous land, and that with his presence and the work that we do, we honor those ancestral lines, and that our campus benefit too from the work of slaves, ancestors who allowed us to build the wealth that we have today. It is my pleasure and it's my honor to give the floor to the great artist, Cosmo Whyte. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. That was really a beautiful introduction. It's a hard one to follow up. I also want to say thank you to Vanderbilt University and the Department of Art for inviting me. Okay, I'll start off by sharing my screen. All right. Okay, so I'm a multidisciplinary artist whose work employs, as Magda said, drawing, sculpture, and performative photography to question and critique the construction of representation of migrant people. As you will see throughout the course of this presentation or artist talk, I have invested a great deal of energy and time in the interrogation of various archives. And in so doing, I want to recognize that I view my body as one of those archives that is a grounds for interrogation, both in terms of how I'm racialized as Black and gendered as male, and questioning these colonial constructs of masculinity, race, and belonging. So I'm going to structure this talk into 3 sections. The first one will be sites of resistance, the second one will be detritus, and then the last one will be in Her Majesty's Parliament. And throughout all of these, you will see me referencing the archival imagery of both Black resistance, struggle, celebration, all of these things. All right, so the first piece we're going to look at is called The Fire Next Time. It's created on a nickel-plated steel ball chain curtain. It's 130 inches in diameter and, in length and 122 in width. It was created in 2019. It was fabricated and designed in partnership with Heckler, a collaborative platform and collective archive that focuses on critical examination of hospitality and conflict through pedagogy, art projects, and residencies. Special assistance was David and Albert Popper. So the Fire Next Time takes as a starting point an archival image called Brixton Riots, London, April 1981, credited to the Manchester Daily Express. Now, it's important to note that the photographer chooses not to show his name or their name. And this was a common practice during that time when photographers were documenting racially charged moments and choose to remain anonymous as a way of protecting themselves, particularly when they were not part of that community. Some of the guiding questions for this kind of work for me is, I recognize that an image is always constructed, and in that process, things are left outside of the frame. Through the appropriation of these archival images, I'm attempting to interrogate the production and framing of Black resistance by photographers outside of Black communities. What does that framing tell us about how we understand these historical moments of resistance and how the framing continues into our present? Also, I'm thinking about in what Naomi Blackwell calls our social networked society of spectacle, how these images are circulated through social media. And in so doing, I'm always asking myself, what is the line between spectator and witness, and how can I shift that ground towards witness from, you know, casual consumer of image into a witness of this, of these moments. And then the last question is, how does passing through an image, because these images, of which there are only 3 so far in this ongoing evolving series, requires that you walk through them to activate them. How does passing through it model the legibility of the image? And what's the role of distortion in an attempt to reframe and recontextualize the image? So the idea for the curtain didn't just come out of thin air. I'm constantly looking at Jamaica, and interestingly enough, the domestic space. Maybe it's from a yearning for home. I'm always looking to the domestic space as a way of generating new work. So I'm thinking about these beaded curtains that are throughout the Caribbean. Specifically, in this case, I'm thinking of Jamaica. And for the students in the room, I'm also mindful that you don't create work in a vacuum. So how do you contextualize your work within contemporary practices? So yes, I'm looking at Felix Gonzalez Torres. Yes, I'm looking at Kerry James Marshall's, particularly the Memento piece, and how the curtain operates as a way of obscuring the figure, but also almost like a protective armor. Here's a video of the curtain in action, so you get a sense of it. And something I really want, you don't really get a sense from in this documentation, but there's a weightiness to them. They're metal beads, so there's a heaviness to it as you walk through it, which also work conceptually because the imagery is not lighthearted. All right, so the second one in that series is called Waiting in the Wake. And this one is based on Black bathers trying to desegregate a whites-only beach in Florida. And it's a clash between the Black bathers and segregationalists. And what I wanted with this particular work is, at first glance, it seems like something lighthearted. And then as you interact and walk through it and you read some of the didactic text, it changes the context first. And then the other works on the other side of the piece further helps to recontextualize the image that you first encountered. And this gesture of pixelation and distortion is something that I try to use constantly throughout my work. And this is just a gallery view. This was from a recent show at Anat Egby Gallery in LA. And this gives you a sense of the other things you will encounter as you walk through the piece. Now, this brings us to the third curtain in the series. And because this one wasn't going to be activated by the viewer, I went in and created my own distortions. But what is legible is this term blackwash. And I understand within an American context, there's a lot left up to interpretation of what blackwash may mean. And I like that sense of ambiguity, but I'm going to provide some context for that for you all. So what you're looking at here is an image from 2019. And this is all of the captains of the various cricket teams that made it to the Cricket World Cup in England. And these are all the captains who were at Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. And you have countries from Afghanistan to India to the West Indies, all present here. Now, you could easily dismiss cricket as this very odd colonial sport, but what's interesting is A, it's the second most played sport in the world, and B, in the 70s, with the rise of Black nationalism, you saw the ascension of West Indies cricket, and it literally became a battleground for symbolically addressing colonial grievances. And the West Indian cricketers took on the role of both political figures and sportsmen, kind of like a Muhammad Ali. And it was also a space in which ongoing atrocities could be addressed, whether it's what was happening in Mozambique or in South Africa. And it was during this rise that the West Indies, and by the way, cricket is the only thing the English Caribbean does as a united front. So it was through both the combination of the Black Power movement, the emergence of reggae as a cultural force in the world, that these cricketers asserted their dominance, and the cricket field became a place for political activism. And what you're seeing now, this image is of the women's cricket team this year and the men's cricket team this year, participating in the Black Lives Matter protests. So what I'm trying to position here is cricket as a grounds for resistance. And then this is juxtaposed with images that are more familiar to an American audience. And what I try to do with each one of my exhibitions is combine all of these different places into one location. So time, the past becomes the present, and everything is flowing in and out of one another. This is another piece within the cricket series, in which I inserted Jamaican Creole, which is called patois, Jamaican patois bad words, curse words, into archival or drawings based on archival images of cricket. And it was a way of kind of negating this perception of cricket as a gentleman's sport, because it was also part of the colonial project to, if you can introduce this gentleman's sport to the colonized subjects, you can civilize them of sorts. Another aspect or site of resistance within my work is carnival. And the term playing mass is a West Indian colloquialism for participating in carnival. I want to ask how rituals and pageantry map out ways of performing, experiencing, and critiquing race, nationalism, tribe, and place in the face of migrant displacement. So it's important to me that I'm looking at carnival outside of the Caribbean, and how carnival plays out in an American or Canadian or British landscape. So it's also important to know that carnival has ties to like Christian traditions, and it took place during Lent, and it involved mimicry, pantomime, and obscuring one's identity. So you're masquerading as different characters, but the colonial subjects, in quotations, use this as a way of then critiquing the society they found themselves in, as a way of critiquing the colonial structure, of critiquing slavery. So the questions I'm asking in these series of drawings is, can we still think of the carnival site as a site of resistance, as a site of protest? And I'm also really fascinated by what it means for diasporic communities to gather and occupy space. So within an exhibition, these two are the historical protests is shown in an act that I'm trying to contextualize as a contemporary form of protest. And what I also find interesting about Carnival in its diasporic space is that you have traditions from Guyana, you have traditions from Grenada, Trinidad, Jamaica, and all of them are coming together and bouncing off of one another. And all of these mythologies and traditions, there's space for slippage in meaning. There's space for I, as a Jamaican, not recognizing or understanding what, for instance, a Grenadian might be doing. But I also feel that that is fertile ground for new mythologies to be created. So I'm not interested in faithfully reproducing imagery of Carnival, but rather as the thinking of the gesture of Carnival as a critique of society, as a critique of power structures, as a site of resistance, and a site in which new mythologies can be created. And this will give you a sense of just the texture that's happening here. So in this particular drawing, I'm hand cutting very delicately in some areas and then more violently in other areas. And these floral patterns that you're seeing are reminiscent of doilies that within a Jamaican home, you know, is ubiquitous. And it was a way of, in a domestic space, designating items as valuable. So it will go over a couch, and that couch is deemed a valuable heirloom, or so in some cases on top of a TV or under the TV. But that's a colonial retention. So I'm interested in how I can subvert these colonial retentions and incorporate them aesthetically into the work. Oh, sorry, I didn't need to come out of. Yeah. So here's another one. And for me, obscurity, or what Glissant would refer to as opacity, the right to opacity, is very important. It's a way of negating this kind of Western rubric. It's a way of saying, I won't show you everything, and it's okay if you don't understand aspects of it, because you're now going to have to evaluate me on my own rubric. I am resisting an imposed kind of rubric for evaluation. All right, so this brings us to the second body of work called detritus. And detritus means debris of any kind. And so the first one in this is called Yesterday a Man Fell Off His Horse. And what you're seeing here is a drawing of J.E.B. Stewart being removed from Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. And I was thinking about in this the 20th century philosopher Gramsci, when he talked about the interregnum, this in-between space. He said the West is married in an interregnum, an in-between period within which the old world is dying and the new world is yet to be born. So this piece was literally done on election night. And all on the corners are these forensic annotations, but they're all from the headlines from various news sites. And I tried to do a wide berth. So these are just the headlines from various news sites commenting on the state of the US in the day after the election. So I went from Breitbart to MSNBC, Al Jazeera, all over the place to find these annotations. All right, so the next one is you're in the black car burning beneath the highway. And this particular piece I saw as a direct successor to The Fire Next Time, which was about the Brixton Riot. So this again is me returning to the Brixton riots. And as I was making this drawing, and this was the first of those kind of forensic annotation drawings, as I was making this drawing, this was during the summer of 2020, protests broke out in Atlanta. And my studio was literally 3 blocks from the CNN Center. So my studio, which was also, I was in a live-work situation, my studio felt like it was in the epicenter of all of this energy and activity. And at night, it almost felt like some kind of tactical warfare where you couldn't sleep because you heard the helicopters constantly, you heard tear gas guns being fired and all of these things. And initially, my plan was to cut the drawing, cut away this white border so you wouldn't see where I used push pins to hold up the drawing. And in a kind of improvisation, I instead wrote exactly what I was thinking in the moments as all of this was happening outside the studio. So I'm using forensic language to annotate the drawing around the edges, reconstructing the image with emotional and impressionistic commentary rather than didactic text. I must also note that the title comes from a poem by Roger Reeves that was published this past June. And the poem is called For Black Children at the End of the World and the Beginning. Again, thinking about this interregnum as well. So here you'll see some of the annotations. And then the third one in this series is called Partus. And in this case, I'm thinking about this both in relationship to the first one you saw, the J.E.B. Stewart monument being removed, and thinking about that monument as a state-sanctioned removal, right? And if you think of it as debris, what happens? What's the afterlife of that? Where does that go? And in some cases, these are being auctioned off and all of that kind of stuff, or bought and put on golf courses. And what happened? Well, I'm thinking about the juxtaposition between that state-sanctioned removal of a symbol and an action that the state would never sanction, and that kind of tension between the two of them. So the text is pulled from a variety of sources in this one, like Toni Morrison's Beloved, Not a House in This Country, That Ain't Packed to the Rafters with Some Dead Negro's Grief. Other annotations read, and this one is my own, The immigrant of color occupies a third space of consciousness, always longing for a home they can't have. And also in all of them is a phrase, and also. So again, for the students, I cannot do work with annotations without thinking about the works of like Lorna Simpson's gestures and reenactments, Carrie Mae Weems from Here I Sighed and I Cried, or Alexandra Bell, or Wendy Red Star. So it's always important, even though in the moment I wasn't thinking of those artists, it's always important to step back and then contextualize your work within larger canon. So this brings me to the last section, in Her Majesty's Parliament. And I want you to bear with me. I'm going to play with you a clip from Jamaica Parliament that was done in 2019. So this is pretty recent, right? And it was a 2-hour clip that I have condensed into 4 minutes. But I believe the integrity of the context still persists. So here we go.
Crown and substitute therefore the words Accountant General.
Minister, in paragraphs B and D, there are also references to the Crown, which is a very antiquated way of putting it. And given that we're changing the reference to Crown in A2 to Government of Jamaica, I would suggest that we also do the same in 6B and 6D for consistency. And let's stop using the word Crown in our legislation with the Government of Jamaica.
Mr. Speaker, I accept, I've been advised, and I accept that the word, the Crown, is antiquated, but it's still on the statute books, and so we will go with that definition. We'll go with those words.
So why are we changing it in 6A2 and we're going to have in the same provision where we're going to be referring to the Government of Jamaica that's going to hold the personal property, and then we're also saying liabilities are invested in the Crown, and we're saying that the minister responsible for finance on behalf of the Crown. It's on behalf of the Government of Jamaica. Anyway.
Minister, can I ask a question? If you're changing it in clause 8, why signal a change in 8 and keep it elsewhere? Are you suggesting that there are 2 different meanings? That will be confused, that potentially confusing. Is it a different meaning to be derived from it?
Chairman, the concerns about the use of the antiquated term as put is understandable. However, we have a Crown Proceedings Act which governs matters. It is the law of Jamaica. And in the act, the Crown means Her Majesty in right of her government in the island. There are specific issues relating to liability, and that is why the term is used and must respectfully remain until such time when the other amendments are made.
So what she said.
Mr. Chairman, I'll remain with the Crown in this part of the clause. We have to stick to that. I've been advised that we need to remain with that term, the Crown, and that's what I will go with today.
Well, Mr. Samuel.
It is clear that we have a difference of opinion. And when you get in between a difference of opinion among lawyers, you're in serious trouble. I am therefore proposing that we proceed with what the Attorney General has advised. Mr. Speaker,
Order, please, Mr. Samuda is on the floor.
We cannot allow our emotions to dictate our actions against the law. That's what I am advised.
Mr. Chairman.
You have to proceed.
I'm going to hear the Attorney General, then I'm going to hear Mr. Twig, and I'm going back to the Minister.
Chairman, the question
Order,
was
please.
asked about why the Accountant General was changed in one of the provision, and that is by virtue of the Crown Property Vesting Act. You explain? You may have questions, I can understand, but we do have laws on the statute book that remain relevant and are in force.
I wish to appeal to fellow members that the real disgrace would be if in the 57th year of our independence, we could not substitute the term government of Jamaica, to whom we are sworn to uphold for the British Crown. That is the nub of the matter. That is the nub of the matter. In the 57th year of our independence, we cannot substitute. We don't have the liberty to substitute the term government of Jamaica, to whom we owe allegiance. First and foremost, that is the oath you swore and I swore. Yes,
Mr.
to
Chair, let
use
me
that
remind you, you are
rather
in
than
Her
the term.
Majesty's Parliament.
I beg your pardon.
You are in Her Majesty's
I am
Parliament.
in the Parliament of the people
You
of
have
Jamaica.
not so moved
You
out
may
of
be, you may be in Her Majesty's Parliament. You can't even go to her country freely. I am in the Parliament of Jamaica. I don't suffer from your schizophrenia.
You do so. You're wearing Her Majesty's wig. But we're
I have no bipolar opposition.
All right. So it ends there with the line, I don't suffer from your kind of schizophrenia. And growing up in Jamaica, I was always confounded by this kind of schizophrenia that exists. In one hand, you can go to the cricket field and you hear all of this rhetoric about anti-apartheid, anti-colonialism, and there's all of this energy put into airing out these colonial grievances and being very explicit about it. But then there's this love affair with the monarchy. And I always found it interesting. So this piece here is a documentation of a performance called Head Boy. And at some point in one's schooling in the island, you enter into sixth form. That's the last 2 years of high school. We go up to grade 13. And during those last 2 years, you're mandated to dress like your English counterparts. So you're wearing a blazer and a tie, except you're in tropical climates. So you're profusely sweating during that time. And I remember my body having a hard time adjusting to it, and a classmate saying, don't worry, you'll get used to it. Your body will adjust. And I remember thinking, there's an absurdity here. And that my body, that impulse to sweat was my first bodily response to a colonial retention. So this was a performance in which I acquired a contemporary British redcoat. So it's one of the Royal Guards jackets. And interestingly enough, inside the jacket is the person's information, the former owner's information, and his last name was White. So I found that quite interesting as well. And I returned to the classroom and just sat there and allowed my body to sweat as I'm in this really heavy wool coat, wool jacket. And then that spurred that spurred a number of different performances in which I tried to find other different ways of subverting this heavy symbol within a public space on the island. That also brings us to Cheaper to Keep Her, which is based on the archival image of Jamaica's independence. So this is a series of drawings in which I also scrape into the surface of the paper. So it's a way of redaction, of taking away information, or you could think of it as adding a layer of information that obscures the information below it. But I refer to these scrapings as keloids. And I think of keloids as scar tissue on the skin. And keloids, interestingly enough, disproportionately affect people with melanin. So I also found that fascinating. And here's the archival image from that from Jamaica's independence. And interestingly enough, my mother was a young girl in this crowd. This is another piece called Keloids and Stretch Marks. And in this one, I was focusing on women who were conscripted to work in the Jamaica's military during World War II. And what the archival image was showing a salute to Queen Victoria, right, on her birthday. And I changed it. And instead of a salute to Queen Victoria, it now becomes a fist bump between these women, as opposed to a salute to the Queen. And then these are the last two. So this one is called Kiss My Neck Back. And what you have here is this, this really disorienting figure in which it seems as though the hair has outgrown its borders and now encompasses the whole face. You can't tell where's what orientation is this face looking. Is this the back of the head? Is this the front of the head? And it's supposed to hearken to this feeling of disorientation, this kind of schizophrenia that I felt both within the country and then the added disorientation that happens through the process of migration. But also, I view this piece is typically shown in conjunction with the next one I'm going to show you. So I view this as kind of this anthropomorphized version of these shipping ropes that they're these curious objects because they have two nooses on either end, which it means it's supposed to tether a boat to a dock. And what I have resting on top of it precariously is a replica of the Queen's sugar bowl. And it's filled to the brim with Jamaican rum. So, and the rope is also soaked in rum. So when you enter into the space, you're smelling rum as well. All right, so I can open up for questions now.
Cosmo, thank you. That was fantastic. I mean, it was really great to see the work and get you, hear you talk about it. Very, very powerful. Yeah, we probably have about 15 minutes for questions, and I have some questions myself, and maybe Magda does too, but I'd rather open it up to the students and our guests to ask you questions. And I don't know, Magda, I don't know who's in charge here, but I do have, if people just want to raise their hand, I can call them, or they can just call out, either way, but I'm going to kind of open it up for questions right now. So, and thank you again. It's really, really, really lovely, really brilliant work. I really appreciate it.
So
no, I think that you are in charge for the questions, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't see any offhand. I would like to just, ask about the images, like getting, I see that a lot of them are from Getty, and I'm real curious. I mean, is it, what kind, in terms of the specificity, I wonder whether it's, when you go into the archives, you've already done your research and you're looking for a particular thing, or does kind of going through the images kind of generate the work? I mean, what is the process? I'm just curious.
It's a little bit of both, and it's not just the Getty that I've used. I also have used like imagery that I've seen, particularly during Carnival time when people are sharing it via social media. I will screenshot some of those and create an archive from that too. But then I've gone to the Black archives in Brixton in London, and the British Archives, the Stuart Hall archives. So I try to have it as varied as possible. And in some cases, I'm just going in blind and seeing what captivates me. And in other cases, I'm searching for a particular image that is just haunting me. Like in the cricket series, I showed you one of all of these cricketers who are over, all of these West Indian cricketers who are over an English player who has his nose blooded and they're calling for the medics. So you see their hands raised. I only recently did I find that one, but I've been searching it for like a year. So in that search, other things, you start finding other things, and it's like going down a rabbit hole that
it keeps going. It keeps
just
going.
keeps going. Yeah.
Well, so you're physically in the archive. It's not, a lot of this isn't online, right?
So it's a combination of both. When I can, I try to physically go, and then online as well.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah. I see a message, question from Jerry. Can you talk about the use of gold leaf in the work, particularly covering the figure's feet? So, gold leaf is reoccurring in the work, and I always found it fascinating that Columbus was in search of gold when he first arrived in the Caribbean, and he even had the indigenous population working in mines to find gold when there was no gold because he was lost. He didn't know where he was, and then within a Jamaican context, gold, as the British took over the island from the Spanish, gold meant different things. So at one point, sugar cane was gold. And then at another point, banana was called the green gold. And then I also think about gold in terms of its contemporary use in fashion in the Caribbean. You adorn yourself with gold as a way of proclaiming self-worth. So in all of these different ways, I'm really thinking about gold.
Other questions?
Oh, hello?
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question about, I'm sorry I got in a little late, but I noticed that a lot of your inspiration were from women artists. And being that Women's Month, what was the, you may have shown male artists beforehand, but what was the particular connection that you saw with those particular artists, like Carrie Mae Weems and Renee Stout, I believe?
Yeah, so I did show some male artists before, but there were more women artists there. I mean, they're just amazing artists at the top of their game. And in the context of those particular works that were showing the annotations, I felt I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. And not to embarrass her or anything, but Magda is someone I consider up there too. And in terms of the performative photography, that inspiration to go that route was from seeing Magda's work. And I don't know if she remembers this, but when she came to speak at Spelman College years and years ago, I came up to her with my catalog, completely fanboying, just asking for a signature. But it was also out of reverence because, as I said before, that route to go in the performative photography was, from seeing her work.
What about Carrie Mae Weems, who's a good friend of mine? What did you see in her work and her history of hers?
Well, particularly in From Here I Sighed and I Cried, the way in which she is able to recontextualize the lens with which those daguerreotypes were shot, but also hint to how they inform the way in which Black subjectivity is viewed in contemporary setting. I thought was just brilliant. Yeah, and then you get into the question of ownership of the imagery as well, and it was just such a rich body of work.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see one from Jana. Can you speak about the relationship with language? The sound of Baldwin's reviews. Okay, so how does reading/research function in your work? And how do you create titles? I have like a running database of those titles. And sometimes they never get used, or sometimes they're a way of thinking of other work. But I'm also, as much as I can, constantly trying to read, and I view research as an integral part of the process. And in terms of language, that's a complex question, because I also recognize that, you know, I'm speaking in a colonial language, and speaking about work that is trying to address the Black diaspora and the colonial legacy of the British Empire within the context of the English-speaking Caribbean. So, so there's that tension there, and that is why I would, in certain instances, use patois, the Jamaican dialect, as a way of subverting that, because it was also used as a way of communicating in public spaces without anyone outside of the community understanding what was being said. So, you know, I recognize that as well.
Mel, could I put a question?
Yeah.
You embarrass me, but in any case, I need to ask you this question because I think that it's important. It was a comment at the beginning of your lecture. Mm-hmm. You question yourself the line or the separation or the proximity between witness and spectator. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you want to go a little deeper in that.
Yeah, and I will be also very honest that this is, it's work in its early stage. It's a line of thinking in its early stage, but you know, I'm very aware that we're constantly inundated with these imageries on our phones of Black trauma, Black protests, all of this stuff. And it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it keeps the urgency of the struggle alive, but on the other hand, it can be re-traumatizing and all of this stuff. And so there's that tension there. And also, I recognize that there is a unspoken kind of contract between a photographer and the person being photographed. And in a lot of cases, there was, you know, what is the contract of permission and ownership of imagery and all of this stuff. So I'm thinking about all of these things, but I'm also mindful that I don't want to slip into being just a passive consumer of these imagery. And I don't want a viewer who enters into an exhibition of mine to be a passive, or I want the viewer to question their relationship to these imagery as well. And there is a difference, I believe, between being a spectator and a witness. And the drawing that I showed you of the Brixton, I'll share the screen real quick so I can point to it, of the Brixton Riot. And I showed you a detail of the annotation. For instance, when I was circling this area, and this is supposed to be these group of people here off in the, what would be your right-hand corner. And as I was looking at the archival image over and over, I kept thinking about their relationship to the events that were unfolding, where politically they stood. And particularly with the Brixton riots, the interpretations vary so widely over the cause of the riot. And it made me really ponder, as you know, as I'm doing this drawing, and remember the context that outside Atlanta, or particularly the CNN Center, is burning. I'm thinking about the relationship between spectator and witness. Even if I'm not seeing what's happening outside my studio, I'm hearing it. I am emotionally invested in what's happening. So there's I think the line between spectator and witness is a level of emotional investment. And can that be translated into an experience when the viewer walks through the curtains or engages with the drawings? I see does that answer your question, Magda?
Thank you so much indeed. It's a complex, I am fascinated with your question and with your answer. I think that is to be continued.
Yes. And then I see a question of, I love your archival imagery of purpose. We have lush Netflix show The Crown. Okay, no, so sorry, that wasn't the question. Okay, we have a question from Mackenzie, one of my students. Can you speak a bit about your sculptural process? Are there similar parameters when you're creating? So I'm sorry I didn't show as much sculpture, and I feel particularly bad I didn't show the one that Magda was talking about the beginning in her introduction. But interestingly enough, I feel, because I didn't study sculpture in school, I came to sculpture a bit later, I feel completely free in the way I approach sculpture. So yeah, so it's a very different process. It's a bit more intuitive, and oftentimes rely on a collaborative element. So a lot of my sculptures are sound-based, and I'm not a sound engineer, so it would require me working with a sound engineer to then work on a score or activate the work.
I think there's a question from one of our students, Kayla.
Yeah.
She wanted to know if, when you're making work, do you look for specific imagery or have imagery in mind? Or is there a separate discovery research that informs your work more organically?
It's case by case. In some cases, I'm thinking about something very specific. And also to note, when I'm working with drawings that are dealing specifically with an archival image, at some point the image gets put away, because I'm not trying to simply do a detailed rendering of this photograph. At some point you have to speak with the drawing, and it will dictate what it needs and what have you. And that will inform my decisions in terms of how I integrate abstraction, distortions, and that kind of stuff. And then particularly with the carnival ones, they're more kind of organic in my approach.
And then I saw one earlier from Suzanne. I don't want that one to get lost.
Yeah.
He was asking, is the cutting also resonant to scarring?
Yeah, so I do have to recognize the role of scarification as a way of showing one's affiliation to an ethnic group. But I'm thinking more of unintentional scarring. So when something has happened and you have a bruise on your skin and it keloids over, and that wasn't your intent, can I reframe it as not a blemish on your skin, but your body recording the event, your body archiving that moment? And if that is the case, what would that mean in the context of slavery and the colonial experience on a Black body? Like, what would that scarification or that what would those keloids do? And also recognize that keloid represents your body having healed that wound.
I think there's one last question from El Curry.
Yeah.
He's interested in what you had to say about your sculpture and the connection with sound. Could you talk about the crossover in the creative fields?
Yeah. Here's what I'll do real quick to answer that. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm going to just go to my website real quick. So sure. And I think is no, sorry. It's all right. So when I talk about these collaborations with sound engineers, typically it's around these speaker sculptures. So growing up in Jamaica, these speaker sculptures or stacked speakers are everywhere on the roadside, and sometimes they're thrown up impromptu overnight to indicate that there's going to be a roadside party. There's always music somewhere in the distance, and I was always looking at them like or versions of totem poles or monuments. And so that informed the way in which I approach this project, but understanding that my expertise is not in sound engineering. So I've actually worked with Kareem Johnson to create soundscapes. And the first iteration of this, for instance, all relied on what I would call field notes. So I wrote a grant in grad school to do the Transatlantic Triangle. So that is the Caribbean or the Americas, sorry, and England, and then West Africa, and then back. But I did it backwards. So I started in the quote unquote New World and went to England, and from England, I went to Ghana, and then I started off in the American South, and then went back to Jamaica. And I specifically went to all sites that had some connection to the slave trade, but were also tourist sites. So for instance, the Liverpool Museum of Slavery, or the castle in Cape Coast. And I recorded sounds of my journey along all of those. And I call them my field notes. And then I worked with a sound engineer to compose a score from these field notes. And some of it was just like a woman who I got permission from, who was singing on the bus as I was driving in the bus from Accra to Cape Coast. And her voice was really, really beautiful. She's singing in Tree. I don't know what she's saying, but that becomes part of the journey. And a lot of it also, what you were hearing was the sounds of different shorelines. And crashing waves sounds like crashing waves regardless of where you are, but with the knowledge that I'm layering all of these different coastlines that are part of the Black Atlantic on top of each other adds a rich layer. Another version of this was talking with my uncle, who, and this is where we get into like family archives, and talking with my uncle, who is talking about a sound system in a neighborhood in which he and my mother grew up in. And strangely enough, this neighborhood produced a disproportionate amount of famous reggae artists. And he talks about this sound system called Soul Imperial. So the piece is now called Soul Imperial. And he's going into how, through lack of resources, Jamaican DJs were building their own speakers and because of the materials they're using, it was creating this distortion in the sound. So it becomes a conversation about distortion. And then you're looking at drawings that have distortion in them. And in it, he's also, it's a jovial conversation, and he's slipping in and out of English and patois. And you can hear him cooking in the background. He's frying a fish. And then there's other sculptures in the exhibition that are incorporating like preserved carcasses of fish. So it's a way of, drawing all of these different elements in. And the one that Magda was talking about was this one, the well-traveled African.
Cosmo, hi, this is Vesna. So I've commented a little bit, but I got the directive from Magda to comment on the curtains. So I'm sort of tuning in because I use curtains in my work, but also as a side of a projection of some historical narratives, but also distortion over the folds and so on. And so I wondered, I responded to that work because it seemed very heavy and as a site of struggle and the beads, like now you're talking about sound, and I see that curtain also as a sculptural piece because you have to really walk into the image, but you're also feeling probably those beads on the body. And so for the curtain that I used, that was a iron curtain, and you could say that this is some sort of a dividing curtain that you're thinking of too, the colonial curtain. So how is that curtain like, do you think ever about audiences discovering something what is behind that curtain, or how do you think about establishing that space when curtain becomes this thick tapestry that you have to sort of go through?
Yeah, thank you. I should have mentioned that the two curtains that require the viewer to activate them are at the entrance of the exhibition. So when you approach it, I found it quite interesting. People would stop because from a distance, it looks like a solid image that you cannot penetrate. And in order to see the rest of the exhibition, it requires you breaking through or breaching that curtain. So I'm very much interested in this idea of what happens behind the curtain, how whatever on the other side of that curtain complicates how we were thinking about the curtain before in that first encounter.
I know that you're going to another class at 4:30, so I want to give you a little bit of time to take a break. I just want to personally say thank you, and also say thank you from the Department of Art. This was a fabulous lecture, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to just ask Magda if she has any one, last thing to say in closure, and then we'll and it's really great to see the students here. It's really nice to see a lot of my students here as well, and I'm really happy that they got a chance to see your work and hear you speak about it. Magda, do you have anything that you want to add?
Well, I only want to say thank you, Mel, and everybody in the department, Vesna, Emily, Jerry, everybody that took part to make this program possible. To thank all our students for being here. My students are in here too. And my gratitude to Cosmo for accepting this invitation and sharing with us such an important part of his work. I think that is an incredible moment of relevance for what you are doing. And I am already curating an exhibition of you and Vesna together, some part in the wall, because I think that would be beautiful. So this is what we want.
That, Magda, thank you.
This is what we want to do in our department, to bring vibrant voices in the contemporary practice and find path of dialogue that is extensive. So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Mel, for giving me the opportunity to introduce Cosmo.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It has been truly an honor to be able to talk to you all. Thank you, Magda, for inviting me.
You're welcome.